In a world so divided on issues that have a profound effect on humanity, how can we possibly help people to see that all human life is valuable?
And that all of these life issues are connected. It may feel overwhelming, but you are not alone.
Welcome to Consistent Life Network's Peace and Life Conversations podcast, where we will explore the journeys and thoughts of activists and everyday people of all generations who are working for the protection of all human life and promoting the consistent life ethic. Welcome, everyone, to the latest episode of our podcast. Today's episode is part of our series on CL parenting, where we're going to be talking with various people on how they successfully, or with mixed results sometimes, brought up their own kids or on the process of doing so, perhaps, to believe in and live and love the consistent life ethic. Today, we have with us a couple of successful CL parents. Our Consistent Life Network board member, David Cruz-Uribe, and his wife, Gabrielle Cruz-Uribe. And they're going to talk to us a little bit about their experience. Welcome, you guys, and thanks so much for being here with us.
We appreciate the visit.
We'd like to start out by just getting for our listeners a general background of your family, who you all are and how you relate to each other and what you're all about.
Okay, let's see. We've been married 36 years. We have 3 adult children. In order, the oldest, Nicholas, was born while I was a graduate student, and he has Down syndrome. And then in short order, we had 2 more kids. I'm a professor of mathematics at the University of Alabama, Roll Tide, and we've been active in various consistent life things probably throughout our marriage. Big driver for that is we're Roman Catholics, and we're what are called secular Franciscans, which is a small religious community for laymen and women in Catholic Church.
Great. So getting to some of the specific examples of how you guys have fostered or taught belief in the dignity of human life and the importance of acting on those beliefs with your kids.
Oh, wow. We talked about it, and we could think of very, very few examples where we sat down and did something really pedantic or didactic. Like, we're going to teach you about the consistent life ethic today. I think it was just part of our lives, and we incorporated our kids into our lives and brought them along when they wanted to participate, and just made it an organic part of being a family. So I think that the best example of the kinds of things we did was in 2004, I think. There was this group, September 11th Families for Peaceful Tomorrows, which was a group of survivors of the 9/11 attack on the towers, or people who lost family members in the attack on the towers. They were trying to buck the trend, which in the media was always identified that these were the people that we had to fight wars for, to get vengeance or justice or whatever. And they were basically adamant that they did not want killing in their names. And so they organized a protest march in the summer of 2004, going, I think, from the Democratic Convention in Boston to the Republican Convention in New York, pushing this 10-ton stone monument labeled "To the Unknown Civilian Casualties of War." Through the stuff I did, I heard about it, and I saw a new article about it in the local newspaper. So we're sitting at dinner, and I'm telling my kids about it. And my middle kid, Antonio, goes, "I want to go do this." And I'm like, "You want to walk through the hot September? September.
It was like
August.
Yeah. And he was just middle school, so 10, 11-ish.
So yeah, I made some phone calls, find out where we could meet up with them, and found out that they were perfectly happy to have people show up for a couple hours and had a sag wagon that could drive us all back to our car. Kiko came along with us. Our youngest came along as well.
Yeah.
Well, we started walking, and we got to the rest break, and Antonio's like, "No, I want to keep doing this." So we ended up walking 15 miles that day, and he insisted on coming back the next day. And so we walked another 12 in the pouring rain, and blew my mind. We get interviewed by the local paper, and the reporter's talking to Antonio, saying, "Why are you doing this?" And he says, "Well, I want to be a witness for peace." Mind's blown.
And we're like, where did this come from? How did this happen? We couldn't notice. It's completely organic. He's picked it up by osmosis from living in the same house with us. I don't know.
He obviously must have heard you guys use that phrase, even though you didn't sit him down and say, You should be a witness for peace.
Well, I mean, thinking back to it, since the kids were little, we always tried to have dinner as a family, and we pray before eating, and we always finished the prayer by saying, "Watch over the poor, the hungry, and the homeless, and please bring peace to our world." So it was not your typical Catholic grace.
Yeah.
Right.
And we do things like we always prayed for the local Catholic worker house. You couldn't tell that because the kids didn't know what the Catholic worker house was. I mean, as they grew up, they learned what the Catholic worker movement was, but they knew about going to the purple and green houses to do stuff. So we would always pray for the people at the purple and green house.
You said when they got older, they did get involved in going there, and I believe you guys also did.
Yeah, that sort of faded out, but they definitely knew more and more about the Catholic worker movement. So when they got older, when they got in high school, we talked about Dorothy Day, we talked about personalism, we talked about her nonviolence.
What were some of the specific focuses of your local Catholic worker house that were inspiring to your family?
We did a couple of things when they were expanding first from the greenhouse into the purple house because they had outgrown their space. They were doing more things and taking care of more people and needed more space. So they bought a second house next door to the first one. And they were busy clearing it out, cleaning it up, painting it, and doing the maintenance work and, putting the kitchen together and all like just, we went down as a family and, our kids were 10, 8 or 11 and 9, or I don't know. They were
littles.
not littles, but big enough to absorb some stuff. So they helped set up the purple house. And they helped amuse the neighborhood kids that were wandering in and out and needed somebody to direct their play in the backyard with the soccer ball or the basketball or whatever. They took on the task themselves. They just went out with the kids and helped direct stuff to keep them out from underfoot as the grown-ups were busy painting and polishing and taking up hinges and I don't even know what.
Rehabbing a beat-up old house.
Yeah.
So kind of doing fun stuff and maybe even physically challenging stuff, including like walking 27 miles in 2 days, right?
Yeah.
Realizing that you're doing it for a reason.
Yeah, I would talk a lot about the anti-war activities. I had helped organize a march to protest the first execution in Connecticut in 30 years. And one of the points where we laid over was at the Catholic worker house. I don't remember if they came along on that walk. I don't think they did, but they certainly knew about it. You probably drove up with them to meet us at the Catholic worker house. Again, what I would say is we would do things, and where appropriate, we would involve them, and we always made sure to explain what it was we were doing, whether it was going to an anti-death penalty march, going to an anti-war demonstration, participating in a fundraising march for the local homeless shelter. All of these things were just part of an organic whole in our family.
That's great.
And it all sort of boiled into, the dignity of life.
Oh, absolutely. So aside from, the specific people that you did these activities with, the Catholic worker community, the folks that were on the Peace March, are there other people or events in your life that kind of supported you and your family as you became more aware and active of the dignity of all life? And also, conversely, what things challenged you or what persons challenged you, and how did you and the kids deal with that?
I'm going to say we felt unsupported and kind of invisible in the community.
Well, I mean, I think when people in our parish, Catholic parish, found out what we did, there was this general sense of, oh, gee, that's nice. So not opposition, but support was
apathetic.
Low key at best.
Yeah.
Or, that's kind of nice that you do this. No sense of, wow, you do this? Can I do it too? Or can you tell me more kinds of things? I mean, perhaps like a typical Catholic parish, the only thing that could generate any level of excitement was when you wanted to talk about abortion.
Yeah.
Which we did, but that wasn't the only thing we focused on. And that's where, the level of interest and support rapidly tailed off.
Were there a few people maybe in your faith community that did see the link between abortion and other life issues? Or was it not that kind of parish?
There were a few couples. There was an older couple, all of our grandparent type people, his parents and my mom all lived thousands of miles away. So this elderly couple became our adopted grandparents. And the kids hung out with them, and they became the conservation sponsors. And they were really aware of a lot of the life issues that were not necessarily just abortion.
And supportive of us. Yeah.
Very, very supportive.
Our Franciscan community as well was also very supportive, sometimes perplexed. I would publish, remember once publishing a very strident anti-war piece in our newsletter and having one of the older women go, "Is this really Franciscan?" But being willing to listen as we tried to explain. I mean, not opposition, but I think what our kids grew up realizing is that we were different.
Yeah. And that we weren't necessarily driven by popular opinion. You listen to your heart and you make your own decisions, and you look at all of the possible sources of information and what's going on, and then you live your best choice, But you can't go by what the Kardashians are doing, or, what's the hot topic on TikTok this week, or, whatever it was back then.
One thing I used to throw out at the kids when we were about to do something that was difficult or hard or unusual is I always say, we're not Catholics for a hobby.
Yep.
And they really liked it. Although when they got older, the youngest started throwing that back at me, arguing that if you did something as a hobby, it was because you loved it, you had an avocation for it, you were getting paid to do it. And I'm just like, my children were smart asses.
Absolutely. So there's an interesting, the last thing that you guys were saying about the fact that it wasn't what the Kardashians do or wasn't following the trend. Now, in a positive sense, I would see where some young people would respond very positively to that. We're rebels, On the other hand, I wonder if they might respond in a negative sense, like, oh, well, we're different. We're going to be outcasts. We're not going to be popular. So how did that play out?
Well, considering our middle son chose to dance ballet from the age of 10, bucking trends was not really ever a problem for him.
The place where we really saw that they struggled the most, but came to understand what we were doing, is we didn't live the typical bourgeois middle class lifestyle. So we didn't live in a house which was appropriate for our social standing as a faculty member at a local college. Most of our clothes came from Goodwill. For years, we had a 13-inch color television set.
We had a small house, only 2 bedrooms. It was the Brady Bunch. The boys all slept in the same room with a bunk bed.
Even in elementary school, they began to realize that they were different from their peers.
Yeah.
And I think that caused them some problems sometimes. And we talk about it, but they began to realize that, life is more than food, your body is more than clothing. And so with that sort of broad foundation of, accepting difference, being different on life issues just came naturally. And was part of the whole package, I think.
Yeah.
Sure. Like a buck the trend culture or something was part of your family. A lot of families in local communities that kids live in are not necessarily like yours. What would you suggest to our listeners who would like to kind of raise their children in consistent life ethic? I'll make it a 2-part question. What ways did the connections between the various life issues come up, in your conversations in the family or in the problems and questions your kids brought home, things like that? So really 2 slightly related things. What would you suggest to other families? And, say a little bit more about the connections between issues.
I don't know where to start with that. I mean, how the connections came up is we were kind of an intellectual family. And so we tended to sit at the dinner table and talk. Our dining room had a huge bookshelf on it, which had dictionaries and atlases and Encyclopedia Britannica. So if something came up, talking about what that meant was just what we did. So I think that really helped us just build the connections as the issues came up. So it's not like, well, I'm going to an anti-war demonstration today. It's, wow, we're opposed to the war because blank. And here, look on the map, see what's going on. Let's talk historically, what was going on in the past.
How did it get to this point? And a lot of it still boiled down to the dignity of the person and the dignity of life. Like the kids coming home from school, having heard playground trash talk and talking about, what's a bitch? Well, there's a teachable moment about the dignity of women and, how you are denigrating somebody who has their own life and their own problems and their own history and you know nothing about them. And you're just putting them in this box because that's convenient and dehumanizing. And that's probably not the best way to interact with people.
She was much more patient with that word than I was. I was just like, you will never use that word in my presence again.
Yeah, there has to be a why behind it. It's like, why is this word bad? Let's understand this.
And, to go to the other part of your question, what I would suggest for parents is if you want your kids to absorb a consistent life ethic, you got to live it. If all you do is preach about it 1 hour a week, or even multiple hours a week, but they see no discernible impact on your lives,
Yeah.
then they're not going to hear it. Kids are real concrete. They're going to understand it if you live it and help them live it. And it can be in ways large and small. If you're a praying family, how you pray, what you pray for. Do you go to marches? Do you go to demonstrations? Do you read alternative news sources? Do you have magazines or newsletters laying around the house? You don't have to purify your lives and focus solely on the consistent life ethic. I mean, maybe I'm burning my CLE card, but for years, a family tradition has been to sit and watch Die Hard on Christmas Day because Die Hard is a Christmas movie. But, contextualizing it, making sure that they understand that this is just entertainment. It's not a way to, view the world. And in that way, I think all the little things that we did with them helped build up and convince them that this was the real deal. And so when they got older, when they got into high school and started making choices, our middle child chose Blessed Franz Jägerstätter as his confirmation saint, and the youngest chose Maximilian Kolbe, both precisely because of their witness to life.
Were they kind of unique among their classmates in that regard?
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
And again, they got no pushback. Like the director of religious education has to sign off and goes, and she was basically like, "Oh, those are good choices." But they were definitely their choices.
Yeah.
Couldn't even tell you how they knew about either one. Probably us, but
Yeah. Has to have been. Well, actually, in Kolbe, they might have learned about either in CCD or in high school.
yeah.
If they're doing Holocaust stuff in high school, because that was a topic in history classes.
But they did go to public schools, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's good. They were picking up some real heroism in their classes. And I imagine, you guys said you had so much different literature and good reading material around the house. So maybe that's where they got some of these exposures.
Yeah.
And our younger two were voracious readers.
Yeah.
So if words in a row were in front of them, they would read it. So we tended to introduce them to things that maybe they weren't quite ready for, but we had them read them anyway. So like when they were both in 7th grade, they both read Les Mis. Because when I was in 7th grade, my brother made me read Les Mis. It was a great thing to talk about because, Victor Hugo had this very personalist approach to all of his characters. And so talking about the situations these characters found themselves in, how they were treated, how the world saw them, how they responded to what was going on.
So I'm really kind of hearing a couple things, a couple themes really, and that's certainly live it, don't just preach it, and then develop that culture of bucking the trend and that you don't need to be like everyone else. And what else? I guess education, be sure that youngsters are exposed to enlightening stuff, and you don't have to be a professor to do that either, right?
That's right.
Yeah. It just requires a habit. Bucking trends, equipping your children to be different.
Yeah.
Is not something you can accomplish overnight. It's really something that you're going to have to be living so that they can live it with you. I think that's what I keep coming back to is that point. You got to live it.
Yeah.
Any parting thoughts or additional topics or things you want to share on the topic?
One thing that influenced them, though we rarely talked about it as a family, just because he was, as like I said, our oldest son has Down syndrome, which at the time he was born immediately turned the political into the personal for me and Gabrielle. But I think the real value for that, for the younger two, was dealing with somebody who was different, somebody who had particular challenges, to use the term that has become more popular, had special needs. That was something that was really easy to build off of, because you could point to other people having difficulties in their lives or needing help with something. You know, it's kind of like Nicholas, our oldest. That example, I think, was just really powerful for them.
Yeah.
Sure. I imagine even if you don't have someone with special needs in your own family, that I'm just thinking of what our listeners could do. You know, you may have friends, or you may want to make friends who can really illustrate.
One of the surprising things we've discovered since we're living now in Alabama is how present the disabled, both physically and intellectually, are in the community.
Yeah. They're not hiding them in the basement anymore. They're out and about and in the community and included and treated like everybody else.
That provides a perfect starting point. So whether it's in, schools have a lot more inclusive education now. So just, making sure that your kids are aware that, there are kids with autism or kids with CP or kids with other intellectual disabilities in their schools. And how are they treated? Avoid the...
the kid with Down syndrome was so loving and always happy. It's like, no, they're a person too. They have good days and bad days and stubborn problems, and they know what they want, and they're irritated when you don't want to give them what they want because you think you know better because you don't have a problem. I mean, dismissing them as being something angelic because they're not like everybody else is bogus. And living in a household like that gets figured that out pretty fast.
But any parent, particularly if they go to public schools. I mean, one of the problems with the Catholic education is Catholic schools don't have special ed programs.
No, they don't.
But in a public school, these kinds of kids are going to be around, and that's a perfect opening as you meet these kids at school events or talk to your kids about them. To open them up to difference, disability. And then that can lead very naturally into discussions about ways that the world doesn't want to deal with difference and disability, be it abortion or be it euthanasia or simply, warehousing them away because, we don't want them to ruin our perfect image of who or what we see ourselves to be.
Well, great. Thank you so much, David and Gabrielle, for sharing your insights and your experiences with us. It's just really inspiring to hear about families that live the consistent life ethic, as a family and individually. I'm sure your stories will be very inspiring to a lot of our listeners, no matter what generation they're coming from. So thank you again. I'm Tony Masalonis from the CL Kids program of the Consistent Life Network. And I also want to thank all of our listeners for joining us, and see you all next time. Peace.
Thanks for joining the Consistent Life Network's Peace and Life Conversations podcast. All links and organizations mentioned in our episodes are linked in the description box. For more information, visit us at consistentlifenetwork.org. We'll see you next time.